We all know of the destruction caused by climate change, primarily in the most vulnerable countries. These effects are coming much before what science had predicted. It is important that we trust science, but we must also address the principles of ethics. Without these courses of action will be inconsistent, incoherent, and unfair.
La transition juste pour nous, syndicats, c'est une sorte de traduction de la justice sociale. Parce que l'action climatique, on le sait bien, implique des actions d'atténuation et des actions d'adaptation. Ces actions qui vont sûrement impacter plusieurs secteurs, dont les secteurs les plus émetteurs de gaz à effet de serre, vont en même temps impacter une catégorie de travailleurs. On n'aimerait pas que ces travailleurs-là soient sacrifiés sur l'autel de l'action climatique. Ils méritent d'être accompagnés, ils méritent d'être protégés socialement.
We talk about something called a just transition that's very present in the UN conversation. It means that those who are whose livelihood and their family history and their local economy is based on some of the energy sources that we need to transition away from, that those people are the ones who are going to be most affected in some ways, as much as those who are suffering from rising sea levels.
Adaptation at this international level really means giving the facilities, the abilities, the knowledge for people to build up their resilience. That might be to do with personal resilience, finding a new livelihood, finding a new place to live. Or it might be to do with sort of structural resilience, building a barrier, making sure that the changes that are happening in the weather aren't going to affect you too much. Finding another source of water, for instance.
Que tenemos que cambiar de modelo, un nuevo paradigma, porque no hay otro planeta. Y si bien es cierto, como decíamos, en este tema del cambio climático es como un barco, pero es un barco que todos no se van a salvar. Los que más vamos a perder somos los trabajadores, las trabajadoras, los pueblos indígenas, porque es un barco que se llama el planeta Tierra, pero que hay pasajeros de primera, segunda y tercera categoría.
I'm from the Pointe-a-Chandian tribe on the Louisiana Gulf Coast, and our tribe has inhabited this area for thousands of years, and we've undergone adaptation and taken adaptation measures due to coastal erosion, sea level rise, and saltwater intrusion. There aren't a lot of resources dedicated to it, even in the United States, and this impacts people's way of life. We're subsistence fishermen. We rely on the resources that are provided to us to live, and it's part of our cultural heritage. Now, in order to move forward, we need support in order to adapt and to thrive. And there are communities all over the world who are going through adaptation.
In Tacloban, all over the coast, right by the water, people live in informal settlements. In 2013, Tacloban was hit by Typhoon Haiyan, and we've heard that yesterday there was another typhoon hitting the Philippines. In 2013, the city recorded the highest death toll rate of the whole country. Afterwards, survivors rebuilt their houses laboriously without any national support due to their informal status. Now the Philippine government is implementing a tide embankment project, a 4 meters high and 30 kilometers long dam to protect the coast from storm surges and sea level rise. And there's no doubt that coastal protection is necessary, but this project leads to the displacement of about 100,000 people without adequate solution of how to live in the future. People themselves had developed a so-called people's plan for this area where they live. A fisherman's wharf combined with mangrove planting as additional protection against storm surges that enables fishermen's families to stay living near the coast. The community's plan was further developed by the support of technical experts. It is a socially and ecologically just alternative to adapt to the impacts of climate crisis in Tacloban. But those plans have not been considered by national institutions.
If you look at the UNEP emission gap report that was released this year in 2019 and also being discussed here, 2 to 9% of the GDP in African countries goes to adaptation, climate change adaptation. This is money that is supposed to go to economic development or development projects in Africa. But this process that is supposed to facilitate financing for climate change adaptation and mitigation for developing countries in Kenya, that money is not coming.
Honduras would like to restate its desire to support and comply with the commitments stemming from our national contribution. Honduras will continue to comply with its commitments, but without sufficient international funding. We're doing it with our own resources as far as we can. But we also believe that it's unfair that our country does not receive the necessary financial cooperation climate funds, in other words, technological and scientific transference, as well as strengthening capacities from the developed states, as well as from international bodies.
I want to talk about somebody that I met in Bangladesh. In southern Bangladesh, they're faced with two great traumas from climate change. One is the cyclones coming up from the Bay of Bengal, coming off the sea and causing great typhoons. And the other is the waters coming down from the Himalayas, which are melting glaciers, melting rapidly and providing much more water than's been used to. And the effect for people in this part of Bangladesh is that the land is falling away. Mohammed, I met, he was displaced. That means his home was lost 19 times in 20 years. Can you imagine what that's like? His situation was that the seas were rising up, the land was eroding, all his crops. He was a well-off rice farmer. Don't get me wrong, he's not a poor man. He had a family, they were getting an education, they were doing all the stuff that people should be doing when they're striving to make a better life. But then the weather came. And it took away that life. It took away the very land that he was standing on. This is where adaptation is needed. 20 years ago, if Mohammed had had the ability to adapt, had some knowledge about what was likely to happen, and some help in finding ways to deal with it, then his situation, which was standing on the side of a muddy path with his hand out, crying for pennies, would be very, very different.
For us, we are passionate about this process because we believe that the current and future generations should have a future that is livable, places people are able to interact with one another, people are able to secure their current and future livelihoods, and through addressing climate change, this will help secure economies and also help people adapt to different disasters that are associated with climate change.
Participating in this type of conferences with people from all over the world and learning about issues that are happening all over, I think has really increased my awareness of issues, but also my commitment and my sense of belonging and how I care and how I can relate to people that I've met here, but also people that I haven't met, because I can relate on things that are going on in their countries and the different issues that they're experiencing. And so I think coming here to the COP has just really increased my world awareness, my solidarity with global communities.
When you're surrounded by the rest of the world, your siblings from around the globe, and the suffering that's going on in their countries, and they are kind still, and they're like, we know that the whole United States is not like what we're seeing in the media, and you just want to help much more than we are right now. It's very hard to face that suffering when people just are saying, help.
It's all about looking after your neighbors. It's all about looking at other people's situation and trying to do the best for them. And at this conference, the cause for, let's face it, it's about money, because with money you can buy the know-how, you can buy the technology, you can buy the resilience. It's about money, and it's about a swapping of money from those of us that are not suffering directly at the moment to those who are already suffering badly.
A planetary crisis is upon us, and none can find solace in political exceptionalism from what nature has in store for us. The demise of Earth's life support system will be indiscriminate. Rising seas, apocalyptic storms, prolonged droughts, scorching temperatures, rampant wildfires, disappearing biodiversity on land and in the oceans. Sadly, I can go on. These are impacts that no one, no country can escape. These threaten global security and stability and jeopardize the prosperity of all peoples.
I don't understand how we, knowing where we've come from as a black community, how we know our history and how we've had to fight and struggle to be where we are and still not have anything but piddles, but not be concerned about somebody else. After all, just as it happened to us, just as it's happening to them, it'll happen to somebody else. But even more so, it can loop back around and happen to us again.
Our last day as party to the Paris Agreement will be November 4th, 2020. But we will remain focused on a realistic and pragmatic model backed by a record of real-world results. Our model shows how innovation and open markets lead to greater prosperity, fewer emissions, and more secure sources of energy.
I think it's really important for us to keep focused on the fact that when countries come to these international conversations, they can only commit internationally what they can deliver domestically. And so while, yes, this is an international conversation about ramping up action on finance, on mitigation, addressing the real climate emergency that's happening, we have to make sure that those of us then go back to the United States and do strong advocacy for action domestically to ramp up finance, to take down our emissions, and to address loss and damage.
The climate situation is dire, and I'm 70, I'm going to be dead in 20 years, so the long term for me probably won't see as much change as it should. But I have two beautiful grandsons that are 1 and 2, and we've got to do something for them.
Fossil of the day. Who is bad? Who is worse? Fossil of the day. Fossil of the day. All the pain, all the shame. Fossil of